Happy New Year. Do you want to say that, Joe?
We're
I
live.
just did. Happy
All right.
New Year.
Yeah. Joe's got Happy New Year for you guys.
Happy New Year.
There we go.
Here we are.
Yeah, we hope you guys had a great time with family. We certainly did. We had a nice dinner, and we had 2 dinners with families actually, because we have split families. So we had 2 Christmases, which was awesome.
7 fishes.
Italian 7 fishes, which was a cornucopia of seafood. We could not
Because the
eat enough.
Catholics don't eat red meat.
That's right. So your Italian
Before.
bros, Jesus is born. That's right.
Interesting.
They only can eat fish. So they eat 7 different kinds of fish.
Yeah.
Make up for the lack of protein.
That sounds like a good time.
I
though.
know,
It's
it
amazing.
is.
It's amazing.
We,
Dude, it's great.
yeah, I went up north, and as a now Floridian with Floridian blood in me, I ran into an ice storm, and Christmas basically got canceled. So it could have been better. But
Those are
I got to
brutal.
hang out at my sister's the whole time and hang out with my nieces and play a lot of games. So I still had a lot of good family time. But
Heck yeah. And David was up north too, right?
Yeah.
David was
Yeah.
up north with family for like a full week.
helps you appreciate
Yeah.
Florida weather when you come back.
You guys get frozen so we can come thaw out with us. Well, today we got a really good, really interesting, wise person you can learn from. Her name is Michelle. She has a Instagram called Hey Beginner Wife. And she helps married couples from the woman's side understand the male. And a lot of her stuff has to do with getting the woman to sort of navigate these male tendencies, these characteristics that are sometimes misunderstood, many times misunderstood. They can cause, couples to split, slowly over time. And she gives really good advice. And so I'm really excited. We're all really excited to ask her some questions. You've been married, Michelle. I'm going to turn this over to you. Maybe you can give us just a brief background about you've been married 31 years, correct? Or
37.
37 years. Wow.
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
That's awesome. And you have how many kids?
We have 6 grown children,
Well, 6
and
grown kids.
4 of them are married, and we have 4 grandchildren.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
yeah.
And we need more of those families. We need more families that are sticking together that long, so we can have more Italian 7 fishes,
Nice. Yeah.
Christmases and whatnot.
That's a big Christmas party.
So
there.
tell us about the beginning. How did you get inspired to start your Instagram to help wives? What gave you your start?
Yeah, so at the time we're based in the Chicago area, and 5 of our kids actually were in Los Angeles. 2 were going to school there, 3 were working full time. They all landed at the same church, had the same friend group, and their friends started asking them, how did your parents do this? Like, how did they raise all of you to be great humans? So they said, Mom, you need to do a parenting class. And my husband and I had taught parenting classes over the years, quite a few of them. And I thought, well, I can see the need for that. I would love to talk to your friends, love that age group, 25 to 35. So I set out starting to do that and realized that my passion was really marriage, and that's what I wanted to talk about and answer questions and deal with. So I shifted gears. They suggested Instagram. At the time, I didn't know the whole Instagram world and how to approach it and how to even get people to find me on Instagram. You're kind of just throw yourself out there. But I decided to start writing posts and see what would happen. And my kids actually shared my account and encouraged their friends to follow me. And I just decided that I would be consistent and try to speak to them. And my target audience at the time was my children's girlfriends, because I thought I can really speak to women. And I had women in my home to do just mentoring one-on-one, done young wives, done married couples. But I really had a heart for the young woman who was in that position of either wanting to be married or married and not knowing what she was doing, or even the gals who didn't think marriage was for them because they had never seen a good marriage. I was
Right.
wanting to put out a pro-marriage message and the practical ways that they could actually access that.
So, did your parents have something that you wanted to emulate? Did they give you like a good example of marriage? You were like, man, I want that from watching your parents, or how was that?
Yeah, great question. My parents, and I would say everyone I knew stayed married growing up. I think in my generation, we have that. I know we have it more than anyone that's come after us. But I saw my parents do the hard work of marriage. I saw them irritated with each other, and I also saw my dad irritated with my mother, but I also saw him really in love with her and the fact that no one else could take her place. So I felt like it was a healthy marriage because they were committed to one another, they enjoyed one another, but I also knew that they had tough times. Um, I wanted more than that, to be honest, because my parents didn't share the same faith. And
Oh wow.
my dad would have said that they did because he believed he was a Christian, but I mean, so I was raised in a Catholic home, and I came to faith as an 8-year-old, kind of on an accident because my babysitter shared the gospel with me. But my
That's so cute.
parents just went to church and at that time weren't believers. My mom actually became a believer through a friend when I was in junior high. I didn't know this was going on. I didn't identify my parents as not having the same faith. I came to figure it out later. And then my father didn't come to faith until I had all 6 children.
Oh wow.
So I saw the tension between the two of them, and I also saw my mom walk out the scripture of just loving her husband well. And
That's incredible.
he loved her for it. So
Mhm.
it was a little rocky, and so I knew from the beginning I wanted to share the same faith as of my husband. I didn't want to go through that.
That's such a good point. We bring that up all the time,
Hmm.
when it comes down to selecting a mate, because you're going to have arguments, and if it's just one person against another, and your preferences towards whatever you're arguing about, uh, then it comes down to who matters more, in the
Hmm.
relationship. And that's not fair. So if you have the Bible or some common point, the Lord's in the room, so to speak, you
Yep.
can help to define who's right and who's wrong with that because then it's just kind of contentious. So that's awesome that you saw that early on. Our
Well,
parents,
and to your point, John, when I say or when anyone says you should marry someone who shares your faith, that's a really critical point because you can say that you share the same faith, but how do you walk it out? Like, do you
mm,
both agree that if you disagree, you're going to go to the scripture? Because
Yeah, that
two people
label.
that are two people that are Christians aren't going to agree on that, or they might not agree on that.
that's good.
Especially today, as Joe and I find dating, that Christian label is so loosely tossed around.
Yeah.
So just sharing the same faith isn't enough. There's
You have to have an active faith. I think that's
yeah,
how you vet it. You
Hmm.
how important is your daily bread, in the form of your devotions, and does a person get excited about Jesus and prayer and salvation when you talk about it? Those are easy ways to kind of see if the faith is alive. But the nominal Christian, unfortunately, is the more abundant thing you're going to run into.
Hmm.
But that's great. So you saw marriage pictured to you in a way that was beautiful. You saw, like, I love forbearance, long suffering. You read in the Old Testament, steadfast love, steadfast faith, and when you see that in a mom or a dad, that alone can give you the desire to get married. But
Hmm.
so you start looking at these younger folks and start seeing what's kind of missing from their from what their expectations are. And so I know you talk a lot about women with their misconceptions of men. Um, you talked about a few things about, like, their response, or when a woman would ask their husband for something, and you use a lot of different examples, and you're trying to give these examples so the women can be like, okay, maybe when I'm in these situations and I'm receiving this from my husband, it's not what it seems like. So it sounds like you're almost trying to reprogram this response mechanism in women when they're talking to their husband. And you said something that was really, really struck me. You're like, a lot of these younger women, they get with their husband and they expect him to be another one of their girlfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
thing we've always said too, is like it seems today that is what they want out of their husband, a female best friend, and it's like that's not what we are.
Doesn't sound attractive.
Is that something you like? Is that changed over time, do you think, out of expectations? Like, did your generation think that way about their husband compared to today, or has that kind of just been a fairy tale forever?
Huh. I think women, because we're so relational, we think that our husband is going to be the ideal girlfriend for us. Our girlfriends can listen ad nauseum to us processing things. And so we go into a marriage thinking that our husbands are going to do the same thing, that we'll just be able to talk and talk and talk and process. And I do think that, gosh, I haven't ever thought about the difference between the generations, whether or not they do. I can say that I thought that Steve was going to be that for me, the best friend. Um, and he is a best friend, and it was a shock. Well, I don't know if it was a shock, but it was a revelation that he could reach his limit to listening to me. And so I had to figure that out of when was the right time to talk to my girlfriend, and realize that it was really fair that I was asking too much of him. I was asking him, actually, I thought, would I want him to do this to me? And it dawned on me for the first time, I think in the first 2 years of our marriage, when a hormonal woman moves in with a man who's steady, it really highlighted for me my hormonal ups and downs. And I could recognize the fact that, oh, nothing is going to make me feel better today. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't fix me. I know he can't fix me. And just as a good guy, he was trying to sit it out, but got to the point, let's say 9 months in, where this is it happened. Now, not every woman is going to PMS like I did, but he finally just said, honey, I don't have an answer to you. I think you just need to talk and talk, and I don't think we can fix this. And it just showcased for me what was going on, and really that it wasn't fair, and that I just needed to pull back and not take it personally, that he didn't want to sit there and listen to a circular problem.
You sound pretty self-aware. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
I think that's a really good point you brought up within the hormonal cycle of a female, and just the difference between like a male's and a female's, and how much that affects who you are in the moment. Like, if you have high estrogen or you're ovulating, you're going to be a different person than when you've come off of, your period, and now you've expressed that and you have more progesterone in your body. You're more going into a safe zone. You have less of these hormones that they have such an influence on your mood and your character and how you present yourself and how you feel about yourself and other people. And I think, there's so many women on birth control now that they,
Right.
I don't think they feel those movements as much. And, but I think that's a great point.
So you seem pretty self-aware, and I believe that's kind of the catch-22 when a younger woman's, she's only had her experience. Like, she has like this experience she has, and then she compares that to what's normal. And it's hard for her to figure out how she can be self-aware and say, these are my hormones. And yeah, there is a huge ebb and flow, and this man is living a different life than I am, hormonally speaking. So what helped bring that self-awareness? It sounded like you had a conversation with your husband. He's kind of like, man, I want to listen to you. I want to help you. We've been going through this for a few months. And I just feel like you need to talk, or like, I can't give you a solution. Like, how did that self-awareness build, and how did you maintain it and keep it so that you had your dignity when you're going through these things? Your husband could be your anchor. How'd that process go for you?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have a whole circle of girlfriends who were very like-minded. And at the time, I had a mentor who was just so wise. So I could take different things to her and explain them. and talk them through. And we really tried to speak the truth to one another, to just say, sounds like you're complaining kind of thing, which I think is unusual to have for a woman to have a friend who's, um,
Honest.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, we did try to challenge each other and not give each other a pass, but I do think about that and who has girlfriends like that and who doesn't, and I know women who wish they had a friend like that and they don't. I think having an older woman in your life is just clutch
It's right out
because
of Titus 2, isn't it? Is it Titus
yeah,
2?
and
Yeah.
I know there's just not too many women don't know how to access older women, and some older women don't understand how to fill that role, which again is why I wanted to start my Instagram page, is to try to say, "Hey, I'm an older woman, I listen to me." Um, but yeah, I you said I was self-aware. I was self-aware, and I also was reading a lot of books on marriage and trying to use them as a template for myself of like, how can I have a successful marriage? So that aided a lot too because I was pretty teachable. And I think if a woman can see that she has something to learn, and instead of just going to girlfriends, uh, reading some books as well, because a relationship really requires learn to have a healthy marriage. There's a lot to learn, and I think we think it's just going to be second nature, and so much of it isn't.
Yeah.
So how did you, with that friend circle, you obviously had a lot of trust.
Hmm.
Um, with regard to sharing relationship issues, how did you handle what was okay to share with your friends and what
Right.
you felt like was, private?
Wow, really good. Um, Even now, my what I try to think of when I'm sharing something is how would that person feel if they were sitting next to me?
That's good.
That's like a gossip meter too, could I say this if they were sitting in the room with me? And if I couldn't, maybe I shouldn't be saying it at all. And so with Steve, my husband, when I had something that just was really frustrating to me, I I did try to bring it up with him. Um, and then I also would do some journaling because there were
Mm,
times I thought I shouldn't be bringing this up to him. Maybe because he has too much on his plate right now, maybe because I knew I was still processing and I probably would stir up a reaction in him I didn't want. And so rather than stir that up, which later I learned was because I would stir that reaction up when I was being disrespectful. That didn't dawn on me for probably 15 years into marriage. I just knew what the reaction was if I said something that was disrespectful. I just didn't have a label for it. And
mhm.
so I thought, yeah, if I bring this up, he's probably going to be irritated and I don't want that. So let me just sit on it a little bit longer and try to figure it out. Um, and then with my girlfriend, it would be more of when if I actually did bring something to her, it would be more of a, do you have any advice for how I can handle this? It wouldn't be framed in, I've just got to tell you everything Steve's been doing. I'm so annoyed and so frustrated and so irritated.
Mhm.
I didn't want to leave them with a sour taste for Steve because I had heard, and I don't know where I heard this, but I heard that if you take your complaints to your mother or your girlfriends, they'll side with you.
Yeah,
They'll end up thinking that your husband is a bad husband. But when you and your husband make up, they won't be in the room.
yeah.
And so they'll continue thinking that you're married to a jerk.
Mm,
And you don't need that. You don't want them to view that way about your husband. And so you can't complain and then not bring them into the resolution,
mhm.
which is usually done in private with a couple. And then you guys are good, but then you leave a trail of creating a bad reputation for your husband. So that always stuck with me, that I wanted to honor him and his reputation. And the other thing too is he's my husband. Why would I want people thinking I'm married to a jerk?
Right.
I mean, that's a
Yeah.
reflection on me. I want people to think I'm married to a great man.
Mhm.
And he is. It's just all in how you frame it.
That's wonderful. My wife and I have kind of a list of confidants, very small, like 2 people on
Hmm.
either side that know us. They know each of us pretty well, and, for hers, they're females, for me, they're males, obviously, and, with those people, we sorta have an agreement, like, it's okay to say more than you'd say to a normal friend,
Hmm.
and, that's helped a lot, being able to have people that you can explore some of the challenges of marriage with, in a way. And I think that's another thing as it's coming to light, as you're speaking to me, and like Mike brought up Titus too, like when you have an older female that's been married and she's already, past the menstrual cycle thing, I think it's a thing of the past. um the amount of help that you can get from those people is like you don't understand. Like it's a lot of help you're talking about. But I
Yeah.
do see far too often, especially with burgeoning relationships, they share far too much, and you end up in that sort of caustic mess where now you're never going to work that person, your friend, into a position where they respect your spouse again. Like that's gone. That ship has
Hmm.
sailed, and you've helped that happen. So I think that's an important thing for the younger listeners to know. It's like, yeah, that's between you and your husband or your wife. Most of that's going to be that way. Journaling's great. Joe and I have this practice when we get into something sticky, we'll actually journal about it. And then 3 days later, if you want to send that message or that email, then you're probably, sort of confident about it. But don't do it right away. So that's great. I have another question for you, which is kind of has to do with the female mind. I've noticed this with women, and you brought this up in your interview with that young lady. I can't remember her name, but you spoke to the sort of habit that females have with using these very absolute adjectives when talking about their husband's shortcomings, like you never or you always, and it's always sort of these things that can make the husband feel like, well, you're not telling the truth, like it's how could it always never be this way? um why do you think women do that, and how common is that among women as you've spent your time mentoring it? Like what is that? It's kind of fascinating.
Huh. I think it's really common that we feel so deeply, and so it's easy to feel that something is always one way or never another way. Another thing that in a situation like that that I learned, and I hope I'll do justice to explaining it, but that's um, the whole concept of respect, of women respecting their husbands and husbands feeding off of just a culture of respect. And even when I start to speak on that, I think women immediately say, well, it's important to me that I'm respected too. And that is absolutely true. We all want to have that mutual respect. But there's something about when a man and a woman communicates. And I'll use an example of saying I'm in a disagreement with my husband, and I start to bring it up, and maybe I will, to make my point, maybe I'll accuse him of something, of saying, you know, you always, or let's say you never, gosh, I don't have a great example, but if it was
Great
something that
husband,
was
baby.
a what?
He's a great husband.
I can't say you're never a great, okay, let's just use the example of taking out the trash, which is super, basic and benign, but let's say you never take out the trash. And so I've immediately confronted him with an accusation. It's not true because I say never. I'm heated and upset because um, I'm irritated with him because I've reminded him about it 5 times and he hasn't done it. And his response, first of all, what I learned was as soon as I start accusing him and then getting emotional about it, it feels very disrespectful to him because of the accusations and because I'm correcting him. And now I'm sounding like a mother. And all those things make him feel disrespected and also kind of in a tailspin because men are supposed to be or long to be respected by the women closest to them, not women, the people, and particularly the woman that he's willing to die for, that he's placed above, other women that he's made a commitment to. I've learned that men speak a language of respect to one another, and when they're at work and with other men, that's their norm. So a man doesn't come up to him and start accusing him, and doesn't speak to him that way. So for me to start speaking to Steve that way, he starts shutting down because he doesn't want to say something disrespectful to a woman he cares about. And so I'm trying to make my point, and all of a sudden I see him start shutting down, and it looks to me like he doesn't care, and it looks to him like he's not listening. And so what women might do, what they typically do in that moment, and I don't think we know we're doing it, we just do it. We double down and we think, I'm going to make you realize how important this is to me. I'm going to get an emotion out of you. So just so you know how I feel, I'm going to throw something else in there. Not only do you never take out the trash, you never do this. And it feels like you never do that. And we keep going to see, like, can you understand how important this is to me? And he starts pulling back, which I think is just such a grievous cycle because it's so hurtful. And it doesn't need to happen if women could understand that men are shutting down because they respect us and because we've disrespected them by treating them that way. That blew my mind when I learned that.
Yeah,
because
it's
I was
incredible.
doing it. I was doubling down. And I have since learned that in the male-female relationship, mothers do that with their sons, and their sons will cry. And the mothers feel like, oh, I made a point. He really received that.
Mhm.
And yet you've just wounded their psyche. And I didn't learn that until I have 3 sons and 3 daughters. And it just makes me really sad to know that I contributed in that way to my boys, because I didn't know I was doing that. I was over mothering them. I wasn't treating them like young men. That to me has been critical in my marriage, is understanding that whole respect piece.
You said something a couple times there where it makes so much sense. The woman is looking for an emotional response. They kind of want to get something from the man in a really visible response where it's like, this matters. That's kind of the way they feel that they're getting enough, or the vital attention from their man at that time. It's like an emotional thing. Whereas the man, I know for me, when I'm paying attention, usually I'm kind of stoic and quiet. I'm trying to like absorb what's going on. I mean, sure, there's times like with my brother, we get excited about something, or, where it's a different kind of feeling of rallying that men have, but it's not the same for when a woman comes up to you with a problem. And then it feels like the problem's now you. And we've seen that a lot. So it's like, how do men validate the woman by saying, hey, like, I am paying attention. I want you to know I'm paying attention with this issue. I see this as sort of like a mirroring thing with the women, where they want to sort of see mirrored in you the way they feel about whatever's going on, and it's a feeling of respect and being understood. So
emotional reciprocity between
Yeah.
the man validating her own emotional state.
Yeah. And see, this is where the thought takes me is if you're in a relationship, you should always be deferring to the one that seems to, I mean, it's easier said than done, especially when something's bothering you. But the idea is that if your husband cares about you, or your wife is caring about you, you listen long enough to get a response, right? So so what happens when a woman starts to use those adjectives is they don't get the response they want, and in their minds they think he doesn't care, right? Isn't that kind of what they're feeling? Like he doesn't
I
care
think
enough.
so.
So right.
Yeah.
So
what's the answer? Like, how do you respond?
Right.
To
So what
show
would
that?
you? Yeah. So I guess what would you like to see? What would your husband do better to sort of ameliorate and calm you down? And then B, for the women to see, like I had explained, like when your man is paying attention to you, he might not be mirroring your emotion, but he might be more still and quiet, kind of stoic. I mean, I can speak on behalf of men because I am one, but on your side, what would you say?
Um, well, I'll speak for me. I don't know if every woman would agree with me, but when I'm upset in that way and my husband responds calmly, it calms me down. It makes me feel grounded to have him grounded. What Steve is really good about saying is breaking it down to the principle of something. And so in that situation, he might say, honey, it sounds like you're just so angry that I haven't taken out the trash. And you're right, I haven't. I don't think it's fair to say I never do it. I know it must feel like I never do it, but it's not fair to say I never do it. Can we start in that place? And that just slow and steady is so good for me. And I think it's good for a woman who's emotional. Um, but I think that is very helpful. And I know for women that act in this way when we lash out, um, there's a book that I read that really explains this really well. It's called Love and Respect. It's by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, and he has a diagram in there, and he says that when women feel unloved, they act disrespectfully. And when men feel disrespected, they act unloving. And so I think in that when we're lashing out like that, we don't feel that we matter, that we're loved. So I don't feel, yeah, I don't feel like I matter. If he's not taking out the trash for our little example there, it hurts me because I don't feel that he values me. And so then I'm lashing out at him. But for him to come back slow and steady and willing to fix the problem and hear me, I feel loved now.
That's really good. And he has to not take the bait in order for that to happen, right?
Yes.
To,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
really good. It is kind of bait. And we just, it's really, we just need a hug in that moment. But
Yeah.
I say that and I can just hear women, being like, no, don't get affectionate. I'm mad.
But it works. And it
We
works a
do.
lot. And it works really
Yeah.
well, especially when 5 minutes later you see things are better,
And then how would you say would be like a respectful way for say the man is, we'll just use the simple trash analogy.
Yeah.
Obviously it can be extrapolated, but he is neglecting his duty on that. What would be a respectful way to approach him on that versus the other way, the emotional way?
I like to throw in the word I feel like you never take out the trash, or it feels like you're not placing importance on this right now. Can we talk about how important this is to me? And just meeting him where he's at and saying, I'll a lot of times, well, I used to, I don't as much anymore now, but I might say, honey, I don't want to nag, and I really don't want this to come across like I'm nagging, but I was under the impression you were going to take the trash out yesterday, and it's still sitting there, and I don't have any place to put my stuff. So I like to put it from that angle of just kind of to see the whole picture of why it's important to me. And then, let's say I had a couch that needed to be moved and I asked him to move it and he didn't move it. And I'll say, I can't proceed with my project in the living room until you move the couch. So it's just going to have to sit there if you're good with that. And if he says, well, I'm good with it. And I said, well, can you give me an idea of when you think it might happen? And then I've learned to just let it sit and wait a little bit and let it sit with him. And the more I did that, the more he took ownership of it and got some things done. But I think it's important to learn that there should come a time when you just stop nagging and let it be.
That's of course a thing of being wise, right? Having wisdom to know when that time is. That's
I don't know that example led itself to that explanation, but there are times when that is really the wisest thing to do.
Sure. I mean, you're gonna have to. I mean, if you get into a relationship and not know you're gonna have to let certain things go, then you're not gonna have success. I mean, it's just the way it is. People grow at different rates, so that's an important, sobering lesson or something to expect when you're with somebody and you choose to share your entire life with them.
Hmm, it's
That's going to
good.
be a measure of forbearance, grace. Those things exist, and it doesn't have to be you copping out, or giving up. It's an example of mercy, and those things. If you stick with it long enough, you see it come full circle, and you see the wisdom in it. So that's awesome. um, most of the time, people just, especially when you know you're right, and those times do come up, just kind of push it home. That doesn't work in a relationship a lot of times. So I
I'll
have
say too, John, I think this is also really good in terms of being respectful, is to approach him with the assumption that he has a plan. And I have sometimes said, "Hey, honey, I know you probably have a plan for when you're getting this done. Could you give me an idea of what that looks like?"
hmm,
Um, that's really respectful because you're not accusing him of not getting it done. You're assuming that he's got it under control. And so he then can say, um, and maybe he can even think on the fly and think, I can get that done on Saturday. But I like that approach too, when I have
that's a
used that
serious
one.
cheat code right there. That's appealing to man's.
I do
You know,
something similar with like as a project manager on like website projects. I kind of use that approach because sometimes you like know someone might need a reminder on something, but you don't want to come in there and be like just accuse them of forgetting about it. So if you just kind of like ask like for an ETA or something that you assume, or you make it sound like you assume they're already working on it,
that's good.
you're not
Yeah.
accusing them then of like forgetting.
Right. That built-in accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other cheat code, Mike, is well, for me, it's to think, am I going to come across sounding like his mother right now?
Mm.
And if what I say is a mother correcting, nagging, controlling, then I need to step back and figure out how to say it or change my tone, because that is for me, that's my number one indicator that I've stepped over the line and I'm disrespectful, when I start sounding like I'm his mom.
So that kind of leads us into something we talked about earlier in the podcast where you had brought up, say, a freshly married couple, they got a kid, and the kind of hierarchy within the family of keeping the husband and wife at the top, even though you got this kid, he's a baby, it needs all the attention in the world,
Mm,
but not putting that kid before, say, like your husband or your wife.
right.
How do you maintain
Yeah.
that balance?
You know, first of all, I think as a couple, that's something that really needs to be talked about. And I think it's a great thing to talk about even when you're dating, because it's something we never think about it. We just take it for granted based on the model that we saw our parents have. And I think a lot of women in their endeavor to be excellent mothers put the child before their husband, because that little baby is so helpless. And we are wired to nurture and to do everything we can for that baby. And our husband, we look at him, he's a grown adult. We think he can handle himself. And at that point, we also think, I mean, he's confident in who he is. He's confident in this marriage. He can take care of himself. He can put his sexual needs on the back shelf for 2 years while I take care of this baby. We just shift to a whole different place, and we take the wife role and put it on the back shelf too. And I didn't realize I was doing that, honestly, because I thought to be a good mother meant to put that baby in the center. And it wasn't until Steve and I actually took a parenting class, and the teacher of the class presented that and said, you're either going to be a child centered family or you're going to be a marriage centric family. And the marriage is at the center. And if the marriage fails, that little child has no structure. Their whole
Good
world
point.
falls apart. So if the most loving thing you can do for your children is to put your marriage first, obviously you're going to put God first because he's at the center of your marriage. But that marriage comes before your children. And then that goes into a whole different, um,
It's a
what's
whole
the
new
right way to
mindset.
say it? Whole mindset. It's a whole way you run your home. We got into the practice of how do we show our little 3-year-old that mommy and daddy come first. And so we switched our pattern. We had the pattern of, hey, daddy's home, and all the kids would run to the front door and they'd all clamor on dad, makes him feel amazing. They're so happy to see him. He picks them up, loves on them. And I'm at the back of the line. And we changed that to him coming home and saying, where's mom? Mom gets my first kiss. And
cool.
I get him first, and then the kids could come to him. And it was such a practical model of what we believed to be true, which was mom and dad come first. So I think if you have that mindset and you really are, you believe that that marriage is going to be the safest place for your children, it gives you the energy then to put focus into your marriage, and then together you're parenting together, and those little children feel so secure when that happens. We experienced that in particular with one of our daughters, and it just blew my mind. We had, at the time, we had 4 children, and our little, I think she was 3, our little 3-year-old, and this was crazy. Steve had his own business. He was working 15-hour days. I was home with the kids all day long. The only time we were ever together was at dinner, because Steve would come home for dinner, and then he would go back to work. I'd put the kids down. Well, in one season, I would wake up and our daughter was laying on the floor, sleeping on the floor next to me. She didn't start the evening out that way. And this went on for about probably 2 weeks, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, why all of a sudden is she laying on the floor? So I asked her one time, one morning, I said, honey, why are you sleeping on my floor? And she said, Mama, I like it when ooh with ooh husband.
Aw.
And I thought, what 3-year-old, number one, what 3-year-old says husband? And number two, it sobered me to realize the only time mommy and daddy were together in her mind were in bed.
Mhm.
So we changed. This was not our idea. It was an idea of another couple. But after dinner, since the only time we had was this dinner hour when Steve came home, right after dinner, we went and sat on the couch, mommy and daddy. He put his arm around me and we said, for 10 minutes, mommy and daddy have our time. And we put the baby in the playpen. We put the other little kids on the floor and said, you can't interrupt us for 10 minutes. You can go to your room, you can play toys, but this is our time. And we did it so they could see us being a couple.
Mhm.
We didn't get a lot talked about in 10 minutes, but it really was. So again, we could model to our children that our marriage was important.
That's so cool, because a
That's
lot of
awesome.
couples I could see in their heads, they might be like, it's selfish for us to spend time together and we have kids that need our time.
Yeah.
When the way you explain it, it's like you're teaching a vital lesson to your kids by showing each other love in front of them, showing the spouses having priority over the kids in front of them.
Yeah. And our daughter, I will say, I didn't say anything to her, but she stopped coming in our bedroom after that.
Wow.
I know. We were just floored. I'm like, how in the world did that happen? But you can't make that up.
You can't.
Like, boundaries are so empowering for children when they see the
Mm-hmm.
boundaries that their parents put up. And I gives them that security you were saying on earlier, I believe. It's like they want to test certain things. And if they see mom and dad are like united front and they're spending that time together, and there's certain things they know that they're going to be protected. You know, they know
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to have that security. And then when they get older, they'll in turn see that as a good thing, you know, as an
Yes.
empowering thing. Whereas I think a lot of kids or parents nowadays want to be their kid's best friend, you know.
Uh-huh.
They want to be like bosom buddies. And I'm like, well, you're not really, you know, the parenting role isn't really a friend, you like your best friend, you know. You're not on an even playing field. You're not peers, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So I have a question. Maybe you could speak to this. So I have my own concept. I think that biblically speaking, I think that man and woman are supposed to get together, and then, you know, maybe after a year or two or however the opportunity presents itself, and the opportunity isn't going to just be on a silver platter to say have kids, but that's the natural progression is you get together and the goal should be to have kids. And I believe that completes the relationship in many ways. So my question is, can couples maintain the honeymoon phase, or is that just something built into it sort of by our Western culture is like a letdown, and then that vacuum doesn't get filled by, say, kids, and then couples kind of go, say, their separate ways. What do you think about that? Is the honeymoon phase something that's fair for people to say, well, we need to, if we're meant for each other, we're supposed to sustain and maintain this honeymoon sort of, peak, or should it naturally and respectively healthily change in a different direction? How does that look in your experience?
Well, I have heard, I can't quote to you the resource, but I have heard that honeymoon high lasts about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's typical then, real life sets in, and now you become partners who are doing life together. And to me, that's when the friendship comes to bear, and that's when the partnership comes to bear, where you are on each other's team, where you are believing the best about them, where you are a safe place to come home to, where you're going to rally and be their support, and you're going to provide what the other one needs. And you've just become one. You become a unit where you're stronger together than you were apart. That to me is a depth of love that has honeymoon moments. I think that which is
That's
why
great.
they will say, go out on a date, get away for a weekend once a year, something like that. I don't think it's reasonable that a couple is always going to be just giddy or all over each other. I think those couples are really rare, and I think that's their personality.
That's
Those
good.
depth of love moments, how profound are they when they do occur?
Oh gosh, they come in different ways. I mean, to me, that's just what marks your marriage. The whole for better, for worse. Um, One of the things that happened in our marriage is I had a brain tumor and had to have surgery to have that tumor removed. We had 6 children at the time. Our youngest was 3. And that was a depth of love moment because Steve knew that if he lost me, he was losing more than, well, actually, I said, I know you're losing the mother of your children. He goes, are you kidding me? I'm losing my best friend. I mean, this is huge to me, Michelle. And you don't consider that every day, the fact that you might lose one another. I don't live with that reality. But that was a severe moment that brought us face to face with what we meant to each other. So that can be a for worse instance. It could be a for better instance where you're just so stinking proud of, what your 12-year-old did on the baseball field. And you're just, it's like, this is our dream. We're living the dream. I think you're going to experience those moments more often if you live in that mindset that life has the seasons. I live in looking for what is my for better, and this is just a for worse. It's part of the package. It's what comes with it. But at the end of the day, there's no one else I would rather do with it, which is something we hear people say. But I think we say that because it's tough. We're doing hard work together.
True.
And we're just so thankful for the person who put in the same amount of sacrifice that we did.
Yeah, I think those moments you really see the humanity in your partner, and you see that sacrifice, and it's the same thing that moves us when we see the passion, the passion of Christ, and you see it takes those moments for you to self-realize. I think that's why God puts us through those tests of faith, and having a child, all these things teach you the depth, like Joe, like that question, because a lot of people don't know what does the depth look like in that relation. They have no idea because they're used to like honeymoon phases, or just one relationship after another. Then the honeymoon thing maybe fizzles out, and they're just not staying with the harvest long enough to see any fruit born from the relationship. So it's really good to hear you speak to that. with having, 15-hour days, 6 kids, illness, all these things present themselves, and marriages do and can flourish in that. So that's a huge
Yeah.
testimony,
And
wonderful
what
testimony.
are some kind of like practical ways? Because I always think of this phrase, "Don't become roommates." I know there's a Instagram page about that.
Hmm.
Like I think a lot of couples do turn into that over the long run, basically roommates that raise children together. How do you maintain that spark in the long term? Did you implement some practical things to help with that?
Well, I think being flirty and fun is something that you can do even when you're raising kids. We tried to just embarrass our kids in the kitchen. Um,
Oh yeah.
have them walk in on us kissing each other and just still be playful. Um, I think that's good for us too, because it is challenging to have kids around and to just keep things loose and fun. We had inside jokes, where you just catch each other's eye, like, she's at it again, and things like that that kept us on the same team. Um, I would
Wow.
say too, something that's really helpful is to learn how to talk about your sex life, because that's going to change too, especially when you've got the real tough seasons of babies and toddlers, and then when you've got teenagers and you're just beside yourself. Um, I would encourage couples when they're younger and as they just go through seasons of life to begin talking about their sex life when they're outside the bedroom. Just figure out how to do it and what words work for you, and communicating what you need, what you're happy with, what you're thankful for. Because if you don't, I think that can get pushed aside and become stale. And I just think it's a practice to begin early on. And maybe for some couples, one way to do that is to read a book early on or now. I mean, even in the middle of it, if you read a book and then talk about it, that might help too, to give you something to talk about
Hmm.
if you're not quite sure what. But at no matter what your stage is in your relationship, if you read something together and say, what did you think about that? Um, that would be a place to start if someone feels like, I don't know what to say. I mean, what are we supposed to talk about? But I think, yeah, I think that would be really
Great.
helpful.
Yeah, it's great advice. Yeah, keeping the sex alive, keeping the intimacy. I forget who said it. One of our guys, I think it may have been Will. He was talking about how it's the glue. A lot of times you can't let it. There's a very special thing about the consummative act of man and woman coming together. It's the man with the seed, the woman with the garden, and there's a bit of ritual to it. That's why I respect my Catholic and Orthodox brothers, because they enact some of these things that are symbolic of our faith. And the procreation part, the consummation part, is at its core the same symbolism we have in our faith. It's the man seeding, the woman being this beautiful sort of soil for this thing to grow in the child. And it needs to be a constant reminder that we enjoy and continue to love. I know for when our experience in the church, unfortunately, has been a lot of women, weaponizing sex against their husband, or not understanding fully the needs of the husband when it comes to his sexual needs. The way he interprets sex can be very off-putting for some women who don't want to understand the man is different than they are in
Hmm.
terms of needs. And I'd say, especially when having a kid, it's a great advice. Read a book, like, educate yourself, let them know, that this man is different than you are, and your man's different than you are too. So you'd say that, I mean, as a wife, and you're going through all this, especially on the sex thing, is it okay for a wife to sort of make sure her husband's taken care of, even if she's not feeling up to that job, like aroused, say, does she have to be aroused in order to take care of her man?
Um, this is a great example of couples talking things through. And I think for that couple to talk about the fact of what can this look like for us, for him to say, this is what I would really like right now. This is what I'm missing. And then for her to say, I'm just not feeling it. Either my hormones aren't in a good place, which happens. And I think we fail to go talk to a doctor about it and get some help and actually take hormones, which can start, in your childbearing years too. Or to be able to say, I'm just so tired. This isn't as important to me as it used to be. And what can we do about it? And then for that couple to come to an agreement of, could it look like this? And let's say he says, could it look like you giving me 5 minutes? I think that's totally fair if she understood why he wanted those 5 minutes. If she were to understand, that would just be a release for me that would help me relax. What do you need from me? And she may say, I need a back rub from you 100 times more than I need sex right now. And for him to be able to say, then honey, that's what you can have. Absolutely. Or she may say, I need you to put the kids down to bed so I can get to bed an hour earlier twice a week because I'm so tired. But brainstorming those solutions, I think, is really fair. And I think it takes maturity on the part of the couple. When we were younger, we didn't have that kind of maturity, or maybe we didn't have the realization that was something that was on the table. I mean, the idea of just saying, could we have 5-minute sex? That was never on the table for, at least I don't think it was when we were younger. I just thought everything had to be 30 minutes and I had to be 100% present. And I knew I couldn't be present. So I just said, I'm too tired for that. And so that's a conversation to be had. And I think for men to be open to and not hold it against her if she's not available for 30 minutes or 60 minutes and what the couple was used to, because she probably can't give herself to that. And then to feel like she's a disappointment to you in that 5-minute space, it's just going to cause it to spiral beyond. But to be able to say, honey, that's incredible. Thank you so much for giving yourself to me in this moment. I know that this is seasonal. I know that, it won't always look this way for us. And right now you're amazing.
Right.
You're just doing so much for us and our family. And thank you so much. And I just count it a privilege to be able to give you a back rub or whatever that is. And hopefully that way it wouldn't become manipulative on her part or controlling on her part. And that's a tough one when women begin to manipulate for sex or control, to hold
and it seems like it wouldn't be so subversive at first. It's just the nature of the hormonal cycle, having kids. We know, women have to feel attractive in order to initiate that and feel legitimately attractive. And sometimes they just don't feel that for themselves. So, the talking and figuring out the dynamics of that whole thing for the sexes is something that doesn't happen often because you're coming out of, say, the honeymoon phase where it's all instinctive. It's not something you have to talk about. It just kind of manifests itself and it's different. So it's very good that you're letting people know this is part of the work of marriage. You need to talk about these things. Sure, it might sound like it sucks the spontaneity out of it, but in the end, it actually adds to it, because these things do graduate and do progress and change. That's why we're in a relationship. So that's excellent information. We're approaching that hour mark. As far as things you'd like to add, some of those hidden gems, things for men to better understand their wives, maybe on that side, or wives to better understand their men, things they might be missing out. You've covered a ton of really good, especially on the communication thing, which I think is where the breakdown
actually
happens.
had a kind of question on, so you had 6 kids, because we talk a lot about kind of this, the term today is like dinks as far as the dual incomes, no kids, but like so many women today are working and having kids. And do you think like your marriage would have been successful if you had to do the daycare thing with kids? And kind of what's your view on like doing the stay-at-home mom thing versus like women with careers that then have their kids in daycare? Like, what do you view as optimal there?
I view as optimal where the mom can stay home with the children. I honestly think that is the best case scenario for our children, to have their mother there nurturing them more than any other provider. And I think it's one of maybe the noblest thing a woman can do, is to raise children. It's certainly the most humble. It's the most hidden thing you can do. And if a woman chooses to do that, she's going to wrestle with feeling unseen, feeling hidden, feeling that she doesn't have value. And that's something her husband can really help her with, because I know Steve did such an amazing job of coming home and building me up and encouraging me and thanking me for the investment that I was pouring into our family. Thanking me on behalf of the children for being their mother, for being present, for giving them the benefit of my education. I mean, I have a college degree, and I chose to stay home with my children, knowing that I could always use that when they were raised. But I think stay-at-home mothers are very passionate about the choice that they're making, because it's such a difficult choice and it's such a sacrificial choice, that we've wrestled with it enough to feel passionate. In our culture, I also know women who work feel equally passionate about their decision, I think for different reasons. I know there is research out there that says there's no difference for the children who are raised in daycare and the children who are raised at home. I just can't
But I
believe
don't
that.
buy that for a second.
But I think that gives them solace if they're working, and maybe they've never known a difference. Maybe their mother worked, and maybe they are frustrated with the fact that they feel they have to work and they're forced into it. And I just have a lot of compassion for those women. So I hate making blanket statements, because I know how challenging it is for them. I can tell you how the sacrifices I made to stay home, and they were a lot. I mean, we lived in a 1,000 square foot home with 5 children. We didn't have air conditioning. I mean, and some people would say they would have all kinds of reactions to it, but we chose that because we chose for me to stay at home. That was the priority. So it was kind of like, whatever sacrifice we have to make, we'll make it. And we were in it together. He was helping me mentally, I was helping him mentally. And if you're not in that place, and if you don't have your husband's support, then you probably wouldn't be successful trying to make it work by staying at home. I mean, there's a lot of men putting pressure on their wives to work, because either A, they don't want 100% of the pressure of providing for the family, or B, the two of them have dreams for what they think it's going to look like to be a successful family. And that might include, a bedroom for every child and a vacation every year, putting money into the children's college fund every year, buying the kids a car. I mean, there's all kinds of parameters. And some of those have to do with how you were each raised. And that's one thing Steve and I discovered, is we were raised differently. I mean, in terms of the car thing, his parents bought each of their kids a car when they turned 16. It was a used car, but they bought it for them. And my parents didn't do that. So the different things that you bring to the table that you think you have to do for your children, there's reason for that. There's emotion for that. So it's something to discuss. But that would be my ideal.
Yeah. And that's what we agree on. Like we kind of call Christians to, you're going to have to sacrifice for your kids. That's likely going to, in today's culture, it's tough to make it on one income.
It is.
But it's obviously better for the children. So what's more important? Is it more important that they have their iPhone and brand new, everything, or is it more important that their mother's home with them and they're in a better environment than a daycare and seeing their family, for 2 hours every night?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's right. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and you asked about what else I would have to say in terms
Please.
of marriage. And I have a bunch I could say about
Yeah.
marriage. But one of the things that I think is critical is learning how to apologize to each other and how to forgive each other. And I think that can be discovered when you're dating, whether or not the two of you can do that and where you're at in your life. You know, some of us aren't modeled how to apologize. It's just, and our culture doesn't help. You know, if you say, hey, my bad, that's your apology. Or if
Yeah.
you say, yeah, regrets, or even if you say, yeah, sorry about that, it's not a thorough apology. And what Steve and I implemented and what I recommended to all of my children to begin doing with each other, and then to take that into other relationships, is to have 3 different parts to your apology. And one is to say, I am so sorry, I was wrong. So you're taking ownership by saying that you were wrong, and you know you were wrong. And the second thing is to name what you did. I'm so sorry, I was wrong when I said to you this, or when I interrupted you, or when I lost my temper and just screamed. I was wrong. And then finally to say, would you please forgive me?
Hmm.
And then to stop and let the other person sit with the fact that you've recognized that you were wrong. You've identified what it is that you did. So there's no question, because a lot of times we can think, well, he doesn't even know what he did. And some, it's like, I'm sorry if I hurt you. Well, do you know why you hurt me? There's a lot of stuff that we still want to argue about when an apology isn't done thoroughly. And with those 3 things, then the spouse or the boyfriend or girlfriend can say, yes, I forgive you. And I think it's important to actually say those words.
Mhm.
I have recommend some people have a lot of trouble with forgiveness, especially in thinking of my audience. My audience isn't strictly Christians. And so I think, well, if you come from another faith, or if you aren't a believer, I still think it's important to resolve conflict in that way. And another thing you can say is, I'm so sorry I did this. I was wrong. Could we please put this behind us? Implies a forgiveness. And that might be a place to start for people that aren't comfortable with saying, I forgive you. And, but I think that knowing how to do that is
Mhm.
probably the second most important thing besides marrying someone who shares your faith.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's where the
I would-
baggage begins, right? That's where the baggage begins.
I
And
kind of have
that's
a
how you're going to be restored.
Yeah.
I kind of have
Yeah.
a question
It's great.
off of that one. How about approaching your spouse on them wronging you? Like I know I think a lot of times men don't say what's bothering them because it ends up flipping right back on them. Like if you bring
Mhm.
something up to your girlfriend or your wife, it ends up somehow you're the bad person in the end. And so I would just, if you have any advice on how to bring up something that they wronged you on.
Yeah, I would approach it with believing the best about them. I don't know if that's a phrase you guys use, but we use that with our kids. And the idea is, I'm going to choose to believe the best about you.
Oh man.
And so,
Yeah.
if that
That's
happens,
great.
Yeah. I just want to underline that we have that same thing in our family. It's like you
great.
always believe in the best version of them. And so when they're acting
Yes.
underneath it, you got your eye on that, and so it gives you more pathos because they're not acting themselves. It's a good
Yes.
thing. And we totally agree with you. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and I would use that in this situation and say, I bet you're not aware that this is going on, or that you made me feel this way, or I just, because I care about you, I want you to know that that landed in a hurtful place with me, and I don't think you meant it, but I really would like to talk about it because I did feel hurt. Um, just couching it in those soft, cushy verbiage, that sounds like you're overthinking it, I think is just going to be it's gonna put the other person at ease and be able to listen because you are coming to them believing the best about them and then appealing to them, basically saying, I want to restore this. And you probably don't know. Or maybe you do know. Is something going on that's making you particularly moody or cranky or upset or irritable? And asking them for that window into their world because it could be that too. It could be that they're hurting and out of that hurt they're responding, but appealing to them, their best self, I think is the way to do it.
Yeah, you kind of establish what a good faith conversation feels like, you know?
Yes.
I would say also in my experience being a man is something I've had to confront is that to Mike's point, you think you'll get run over or you're going to get this negative feedback because most of the neurotic tendencies in the relationship are brought on by the woman expressing whatever's going on in her life. And I think we sometimes misunderstand that when we bring it up, if we were to bring it up in good faith, the way you described it, you'd be surprised the woman actually wants to hear it because she does go through probably a lot more things just by nature of her biology than you do. So if you're
Mhm.
going through something, she's going to instinctually, hopefully have that. And I experienced that with my wife. That was honestly mind blowing when I was like, you know what, I have something going on. And this is probably a year or 2.5. And I was like, this is bothering me. And I know it's coming up in our relationship, sort of a irritated mood, and I didn't want her to think it was coming from her, as a work related thing. And I brought it up and she wanted to hear about it, and I was kind of
Mm.
surprised at that because that was not, it was me bringing it up. So I had to try it out,
What if she was the cause of it though?
if she was the cause of it, that would be something like, I think what she says is so good because I think built into, when you broach subjects like that is you want the person to take responsibility, but you have to first, if you have a built-in accusation to bringing it up, it's going to immediately be defensive. But if
Yeah.
it's a good faith beginning, like you may not know about this, you may not be malevolently trying to drive me nuts right now. I married you because I think you're a good person, basically. I think that's going to have a better outcome, So, but I do think that when men are at that point, and this is something to understand, is we get to that pressure cooker point. It takes us a longer time to get there, but when we're there, we're usually pretty pissed, because it's
Mhm.
taken that much time to get there, So I think that's something to consider too.
Well, and in that moment, going back to the whole idea of the love and the respect, that's the point where a lot of men shut down because they are so upset. They need to regroup or they're going to do something they regret. And I think it's in that moment, it's helpful to even say, it's super sobering though, if you were to say, honey, I'm so upset right now. I can't talk about this anymore. And I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. You're just going to have to give me time. It's going to be okay, but I need time. And so I'll let you know when I've cooled off. That would be really helpful to hear as a woman because it helps us to understand you and it also helps us to really respect the way you're handling your emotions. Um, most of us don't do that naturally. I'm trying to be better at that, to
Yeah,
be more like
That's a
men in
great
that
point.
regard. I love
I
it.
think a lot of people are afraid to, and it's part of being mature in your characters, be like, I have to handle myself right now.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm emotional right now and this is not what's going on. But there are also those times to where just saying that like you did, just like I'm in this state, kind of acknowledging it verbally in front of your partner and taking accountability for that gives them like this pathos for you almost immediately. They're like, oh well, like you all, it puts them off of the defense, because they see you
Yes.
in your struggle and you're opening that door to them to kind of be like, it's not you, it's me, it's this right now, instead of trying to point the blame meter to someone, or trying to, and that I think, because it's not always black and white, is it, in a marriage?
Right.
It's not always white and black and right or wrong, so often it's like, and that's what communication is, like you've said so many times. It's like being able to get through those moments. And your tips are they seem like simple, but they're so thoughtful at the same time, because you actually love this person. You also like paying attention to your own self and your growth with this person. And it's just really cool, like the way you bring in the humor with each other, and the spice of the sexuality, and doing these things, and kind of acknowledging these really hard things to do, or more or less easy things to not pay attention to, and kind of let slowly drown away, into the abyss, and to keep the relationship beautiful and thriving.
It's vital. It's
Yes.
great. Yeah.
Was there any other ones you want to hit on? Because I think if we'll go into the relationship side of things, the advice I'd say for your sons, if unless you got some more marriage stuff.
Let me see. I would say, well, for a successful marriage, you've got to commit to one another that you're not going to threaten divorce, or
I remember seeing
use that as, no matter how mad you get, you're just not going to say that. I think that makes you feel safe, and it's a boundary that you set that also you can relax in. I think that's important. I would say, as a couple, be careful not to bond with one another over things you don't like. I see this happen where you've got couples come together, and he talks about how frustrated he is with his brother. And so they're on the same page of, yeah, we both don't like your brother, or yeah, we both are irritated by the fact that your sister does that. And you feel a united front about something negative. I would be very careful about doing that. I would make sure that you're connecting with one another on positive things and not anti people. Does that make sense?
That's great.
That's awesome. That's like a good family rule, just between like brothers and brothers, or sisters and sisters. I mean, yeah,
It's good all around.
yeah, that's badass. That's good.
Yeah, that's a killer. I love this. My sister-in-law said this, and I thought it was amazing. She just celebrated her 30th anniversary, and I said, okay, what's your best marriage advice? And she said, don't say everything you think. I love that, because as women, we feel like we need to be authentic and honest. And so we have to share out of, well, I just have to be honest, or I want him to know, me. And I love that advice. Just don't say everything you think. Hold off. You don't need to be honest about everything.
Yeah.
So I've got that. Let some things go. That was something that I brought up before. And I would say, for a successful marriage, you focus on what you're thankful for, because that'll get you out of any tendency to complain or be irritated or angry. When you start going through the things that you're thankful for in that man, what he's done for you, even if you get to that, he hasn't taken out of the trash. Okay, well, what 5 things has he done? And list those things. You can turn your attitude around real fast before you even have that discussion about the trash. So that would be another.
Yeah, I'd say that's like an exercise in qualifying your feelings with being honest with the entire picture, the story. It's like, well, I feel really bad about this, but let's qualify our feelings. Like, is it okay? Has he done X, Y, and Z? And we should do that with our wives too, obviously. But that's great. I enjoy that a lot. Exercise of honesty.
We got a couple of comments that we might as well hit now before we switch gears. Kate said, you want to pull that up? Any advice on being flirty with your husband, or if you're flirty, or no, if being flirty with your husband doesn't come naturally, do you just fake it till it feels natural, even if it feels awkward?
Oh gosh. Um,
That's what
probably, I think
Probably,
so.
yeah.
You gotta
I
learn,
think,
right? I mean, it's never gonna
yeah,
feel like you're the shit, you're the best in the very beginning. It's probably gonna feel, and that's probably gonna be some of your fondest memories is, working through it together.
is muddle through it. And it depends on what you mean by flirting too. I mean, sometimes I think just being playful is flirting. When you just kind of go in, I'm just sit on his lap, or just go in and say, okay, excuse me, all eyes on me. I mean, that's just fun. It's just he might just look at you and go, "What?" Just anything that's unexpected and fun. It doesn't. I mean, by flirty, I'm not saying, um, come in and
Right.
flash him or something. I mean, it's not like just trying to get him in bed flirty. It's like having fun with him and trying to get you to look. Doing something. Say, "Nah, made you look." Just something playful. I think maybe to reframe it that way might help you come up with some ideas.
Keep it playful.
That's
Mm.
awesome.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be overtly sexy,
right.
It can be flirty. Yeah. I love that. Got another one
Let's
over
see.
there?
George Bruno's in the chat. Hey, George.
What's up, George?
George.
Yeah. Let's see. George, a positive marriage show. Nice, much needed. I would ask the popular message about legal marriage as it's done today versus private covenantal marriage. And this is actually a pretty common, I would say, kind of red pill topic. Because of the divorce stats, and then the fact the state got involved in the marriage world and kind of ruined it in the last couple decades. There's this talk like, well, why isn't marriage just done with the church covenantally? Like, why are we involving the government in our marriage life? So that's kind of the basis to that question. I see our new Speaker of the House. He's covenantally marriage.
Interesting.
It's definitely something that you'd have to understand with your wife, being covenantally married. Yeah, between two married people of faith. My wife and I were. That's how we began. The contract with the state came later, but that was the most important thing, was that our souls were being entwined with a understanding for the implications of it on a metaphysical level. It was not just we're in love. It's like, this is a permanent thing. These flesh are meant to become one. So under those circumstances, there's a finality to it where both the man and the woman understand it, where it doesn't matter if a piece of paper is involved or not. It transcends the importance of a contract at that point. But for people who don't, they need that sort of structure built into it, maybe, like younger couples. That's the advice I was given by my pastor, because we actually talked about that at length. And it's like, if you have a younger couple, that's maybe 25 and under, I wouldn't say just get covenantally married. I'd be like, this is not maybe a concept you can understand at that age. Maybe if they're a little older than that, depending on their spiritual walk, you'd have to really have them understand what marriage means, from a biblical standpoint. This is not something you can back out of unless, adultery or like serious things go on. But yeah, so it's not, I don't think in the red pill arena, they typically talk about it correctly, because I think they're just scared of the contract and then the woman running off with half their stuff, so sort of a caveat action they might take. But anyway.
Yeah, I think that's probably it for chats that are kind of question based. So yeah, I guess to switch gears, I don't want to keep you all night here either, Michelle. So if you have to go, just give us a warning.
Okay.
But I would ask you, what advice would you give your sons in like picking a spouse today? Or I'm sure it
Yes.
sounds like a few of them are married. So what were you looking at in those women they were picking?
Well, we told our children, you want to marry someone who shares your faith. And we talked about that. I think that's important. I also would encourage them to find someone who shares their worldview. I don't think it's critical. It's very helpful, though, that you see the world from the same vantage point, and because that affects the decisions that you're going to make for your family and how you parent. That would be ideal in my mind. and again, I encourage my sons and my daughters to talk about apologizing and forgiveness and what that looks like in a relationship, and making sure that that's something that they're comfortable with, because that's going to reveal other things if they can't. I know one of the things I encouraged my son, I just said, how do you feel when you're with her? Do you feel like you're at home? Do you feel like you can relax? Do you feel like you can be yourself? Are you safe? For my daughter, it's very similar. Do you feel that you can be vulnerable and still be safe with him? But I know one of the things that when Steve and I met, I just felt like I had arrived home, and it was very interesting to me because I couldn't put my finger on it, and I didn't feel like that with any of the other men I had been with. So whatever that is, it's just a question to ask yourself. And my son, who just got married, he said, I feel really relaxed when I'm with her. And I thought, you know what? That's great. That's it, is he could relax, and he felt like he could be himself and his best version of himself. One thing I told my sons, and they never really liked this, but when they were in college, I said, you know what? Don't get the nice car until after you've met her and you're sure that she's the one. And that was frustrating to my son, who wanted to get a really nice car. And I knew he just thought it was silly advice. But for me, when you know that a woman loves you for who you are and not for your things, I think that's so critical for a man, especially the more successful men when you get older. So I don't know, that was just quirky me advice, but my son wanted to get a car above his means, and I thought, you know what? If you're driving a junker, she should love you for who you are and not be concerned about that car. Just tell her, I don't have the money to get a better car, but I'm working toward it. Anyway, he did keep the little Honda Civic for a long time, and when he met her, he still had it. So I liked that. I think that a woman's attitude is huge, and whether or not she's a cheerful woman. If you've got a woman who complains or who spends her time gossiping about her friends to you, I think that's a red flag. So that was something I really wanted my sons to find, was a cheerful wife, because that sets the whole attitude of the marriage. I also encourage them to look for a woman who can do hard things, because there's so much in our culture that we try to make easy, and we try to find the easy way out, and we try to back out of it. And we talked about tonight just the challenges of marriage. And so, is that a woman who can come alongside you and do something hard? If you want to build a business together, can she live on a budget for 10 years while it's happening? If you want to raise a large family, can she do hard things? Is she okay to do without for a while? So it's a conversation to be had. How to actually vet that out is part of the challenge, of course, but that's something I think to have in the back of your mind. I for sure would mention social media to them. Like a few of them mentioned, hey mom, I went out with this gal, and I would look at their social media and I just said, I think it's really disappointing that she has this many pictures of herself in a bathing suit. She's leading with her body, and her body is only going to carry her so far. And I'm truly concerned that that's what she has on Instagram. Like, who is she? She's got to be more than her body. And why does she feel like she's got to put this out there? And, to women that are doing that, again, I have compassion, because some, I don't think it's even dawned on them that they can do anything else. And I think some of them would say, that's the only way I can get a man's attention, because that's how they've been trained by our society. But to me, it's something to figure out, what's behind all that. Is it an insecurity? Is it a past? Is there a reason why she's putting herself out that way?
Yeah, I would be, women aren't they probably don't know how many of us men disqualify them because of their social media. We just see them, and we would probably normally try to contact them, but they rule themselves out from their choice of content.
Yeah, it's been normalized. It would take a reflective woman to think through modesty in a day like this, and she would be called a prude. You know,
Yeah.
that's the honest to God truth.
Oh, she doesn't have to be wearing a burqa. But I
No,
mean, like
no.
50, 60 pictures of this, he kind of tells you what's going on. So
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
too, yeah.
by no means do you have to.
I really like your quirky advice, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. Like, I just enjoy it. It's hearing it. It just sounds real. You know, like cool
Aw.
stuff that people can think about because it gets the wheels turning for everyone. And they're different. You know.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. It's
True.
really.
And
Thank you for
I mean,
sharing.
obviously we're more than who we are on Instagram. And if you meet a woman in person, I think you can tell how she dresses, how she presents herself. And let's say she just wasn't taught by her mother and a man says, I'd feel more comfortable if you were a little more covered up. I think that's fair. And that would be an interesting conversation to have, um, to kind of find out where she's coming from. Like, is that going to land in a place where she thinks you're just being controlling? Or is it going to be a place where, no, I really care about you. And I see so much value in you besides who you are in your body that I want you to lead with that. Uh, I can't imagine a woman not feeling loved when she heard that. But that is something in particular that I mentioned to my sons that I thought was really important. The other thing I asked my sons to do when they were like, one of my sons just was not finding a wife. I said, why don't you ask your pastor which women are gold in in their congregation that are still single? Because there's amazing women who are serving behind the scenes, who have been passed over. Maybe they're in their 30s and that's why they're being passed over, is they're just not considered in their prime. Maybe they're not stunning to look at, but they're amazing wife material. And honestly, there's a lot of us women. I know a handful of women right now who fall into that category, who are incredible women, but you wouldn't put them on the cover of a magazine. And yet they're going to be amazing mothers. I mean, when I'm talking to my sons, you're picking not just your wife, but the mother of your children. And are you a man with the kind of worldview and mindset that's important to you? I mean, my husband was serious about the children he was going to raise and the mark they were going to leave on the world. We wanted to raise men and women who would change the world. So he was looking for a woman who was going to raise world changers for him. And I believe my sons plan to do the same thing. So my advice to them was along that same vein of who's gold, because our bodies are going to fail us. And my husband's more realistic. He knows that men are attracted to very beautiful women. I get it. I just have a soft spot for these women who are amazing. And I feel like they're being passed over. And along that same lines, I told my sons, when you find someone, you need to ask your sisters what they think of her. Because women know women, and we can spot, I think we spot red flags faster than the men do, because we can see through it and what they're doing. So I encourage my sons to get the outside counsel of their sisters.
I always ask my sister. You got to pass her test.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
The beauty thing is this. Like, I always think it's kind of a curse God gave men on beauty being such high want from us, because it's like there's so
Yeah.
many women that we don't find beautiful that I know would be great wives.
Yes.
True.
Well, and I know, I don't know if this lands with men in the way it lands with me, but if I was a man, I would be looking at her attitude, because in the bedroom, when you're naked, your attitude is huge. And you might not be the most beautiful woman, but if you are playful and ready to love him and delight yourself in him, that means so much more than that woman who's got a perfect figure and clear skin. So, and attitude doesn't go away. I mean, when you're 5 months pregnant, when you're 2 months postpartum, you're still a woman with an amazing attitude. So I would, and if you can't discern that, I would ask the Lord to help you reveal what this woman's attitude is. Because as much as her body's going to change and her attitude's going to change a little bit, I mean, a 2 month postpartum woman is probably not feeling super playful, but that can be consistent in ways that your body isn't.
Yeah, it's very easy to tell too on the extremely beautiful women how much their beauty corrupts their attitude. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's very evident today.
Yeah, I was gonna play devil's advocate. I'm like, maybe they are such good wives because they're maybe a little homely, so they have to work harder on the other side of things versus a very beautiful woman who gets everything handed to her and doesn't have to work hard for, being a great attitude. She doesn't have to. She can be all pouty and upset all day, and we're still gonna treat her great because she's gorgeous.
Yeah, well, that's why I think I've heard model girls say beauty is a curse, like when they get older and recognize what it did to them.
Rules of the jungle, man. That's why you got to know about it before you let it get the best of you. It's true.
Oh, great advice. Great advice. So happy we talked tonight.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and it's very sobering and nice to hear from a mother and a wife, and just felt like I was with family, and I appreciated that. It was very nice.
It's like our Aunt Michelle. Felt
There you go.
I love that. It did feel that way.
Well, and thank you so much, because we ultimately want to show like marriage can be successful today. Like the stats aren't applied to you. Like people think like, oh, if I get married, my chances of divorce are 50%. It's like, no, that's not your stats. That's just if you're an average person. If you're putting Christ at the center of your marriage, if you're doing these things, taking practical advice, those are not your odds. And
creating world shakers,
Yes.
like Aunt Michelle was. They got goals here,
go.
Shooting for the moon.
Yeah,
It changes it. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, not just those vacations and Instagram photos. They have that. I can't imagine your deep love moments when you look at each other, you look at your kids, and you look at your legacy, and you're like, man, that's gonna last so much more than the pictures of Dubai with like your fifth wife or whatever.
It's something you want for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've experienced it, you want to give it away. And you want them to have it. And so, I mean, that's where my passion comes from, is this is what I want for everyone. And we went through really hard patches, but we got to the other side because we never had divorce as an option. We always saw each other as a team. We had the mutual goal of raising our children to love one another and to love God and be family minded and to be community minded. I mean, it wasn't just about our family. We weren't trying to shelter them. We wanted them to love people. And so out of that, having that like-minded goal, we walked through tough places. And I think because it's so satisfying at the end, I just want people to know that's what it looks like. And that is what you want. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not good. Just hunker down and do it and find yourself a support system. And you all sound like you have a great support system in your group of men, and the fact that you're doing this podcast to share what your vision is, to kind of normalize for other men that you can be, a brotherhood to them. You can encourage one another in love and good deeds. I think your podcast is going to thrive. Just thrilled to have been a part of it.
Gosh, thank you, Michelle. Those words are so encouraging. We appreciate it. And ultimately, it's like you said, it's community and family. We're part of this eternal family. Let's tap into that now.
We got Rusty had a couple super chats here. I don't know. I would recommend couples learn about blood covenants. I don't know about that one. And then Rusty again, my ex-fiance always hated being driven around in a jump car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That means she loves you, bro.
See,
Well,
that reveals something. I don't
he's
know.
an
I
ex-fiance
personally
for a
am
reason.
super comfortable. I mean, my parents were both raised on farms, and I just was used to things not being perfect. I wasn't raised on a farm, but I think to be able to look past material things, it's going to tell you a lot about a woman.
Yep.
Yeah, if you can
Yeah.
make your kids able to go to school with material items that don't indicate this, sense of zenith in your community, then status. You have made a world shaker, because then you can't manipulate that kid with the same old crap that the world manipulates you into try and make you do this and make you do that. He's no longer, he's transcended. Now he's a child of God. He has bigger goals. And so,
There you go.
yeah, we grew up with those things too, or those lack of things. But that while you're going through it, especially if your parents can impart the value that you have in it and why you're making those sacrifices, what you're putting first, what your family's actively doing, it's kind of like that punk rock attitude that you can give your kids, and it's good. It's very good. It'll make them be able to stand up for themselves when the herd is, piling off the cliff, and there's no
Yes.
way you either learn that after you've taken a dunk off the cliff or your parents teach it to you when you're young. So that's awesome.
Rusty again with a super chat. Marriage is a blood covenant. Rusty. I'm picturing like two people shaking hands after cutting their hand.
I
Like,
think that's what happens when you have sex, though. I mean, that's
Yeah,
pretty much like exchange fluids at that point.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I see what he's mean. I see what he means
Yeah.
by it.
Yeah,
He's
that
trying.
makes
He's
sense.
trying to make it like it's that serious. I get
it's
it. I
that
get it.
serious.
It's that.
It's a life
serious.
bond.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Happy New Year, and we'll catch
Happy
you.
New Year.
Happy
Sounds
New
good.
Year.
Yeah.
Yo.
All right.
Next week. And thanks, Michelle. You can hang on after we end it here, and then we will wrap up.